Welcome back to Diary of a Medium, Stories from the Spirit World podcast. I'm your host, Em Stavisky, and I am so excited to be here. Gosh, it's been like a hot minute. Christmas has been and gone, school holidays are over, and now I can get back to podcasting. So, in this episode, I want to share with you really, I guess, what I would say would be entry 2 in my diary. Now, we have a really big gap between entry 1, which you can go back and listen to, as a 16-year-old, where I had these experiences with a girl by my bed in the middle of the night that absolutely scared the bejeebers out of me. Fast forwarding all the way to the birth of my first daughter. Now, I do just want to give you a little disclaimer here because I am going to talk a little bit about birth trauma and how I had experience with the spirit world in the birth of my first daughter, Ella. So, let's fast forward. Well, last time I talked to you about this, I was the 16-year-old girl in my dad's bedroom. Now, when I was 31, I was pregnant for the first time with my oldest daughter, and everything was, going as it should be, I guess, being a first-time pregnant mom, and, everything was on track, everything was fine. Now, she was actually a late baby, right? She liked her comfort zone, didn't want to come out. So she was actually 13 days overdue. Now, I gave birth to her in the UK, so she was born there. And it was the 7th of July, 2004. Now, I don't want to go into too much detail. I obviously did put a little bit of a warning on here that I wanted to talk about, I guess, births that didn't necessarily go smoothly. And I think certainly for me in that time, I was probably a little bit naive to really understand that things could go wrong. Not everything's going to go to your birth plan, like all the, the things I'd wrote down and I wanted and I didn't want, basically got torn up and thrown out the window. And I know that happens with a lot of people, and it can leave, I guess, not only physical scarring, but definitely mental scarring in the experience of childbirth. Now, that being said, I did go back another 2 times and do it twice again, because you know what, it's easy to forget. And obviously the experience of having, my beautiful daughter was something that I wanted to do again. But I'm going to kind of journey back to literally her birth and what actually happened to me. Like a lot of women, and the babies doesn't want to come out. She's really happy and content in there, that I had to be taken into hospital to be induced. And honestly, there probably wasn't a lot of stuff on the internet around then. You're talking like 22 years ago, right? There wasn't really a lot going on with stuff that you would Google and that kind of stuff that you would look up. I mean, was Google around then? I'm not sure. I'd probably have to check that out. But I don't really recall there, other than, the things that the midwife gave you in your appointments. There wasn't books you could read. There wasn't a lot else available. Now, I ended up getting taken in for this induction for her. And obviously they tried to firstly do the sweep and break the waters, and that didn't work. So after that was the drugs that they inject to induce you. Now, what happened after that was I did go into a very quick labor. So I went into a very quick labor, dilated very quickly, but then everything slowed down. And, I've since really found out that this can happen in inductions as well. So everything slowed down for me, very, very slow, very slow. And in that time that I was trying to obviously give birth to her, there wasn't much happening. And we ended up, probably around about 22 hours in, having to do a the 1-2, which is a suction for her. All I remember at the time, and my husband said this to me, was just like, there was just lots of people in the room. And like, he makes a joke now of like, you know, he looked up at one point and there was just some guy holding the light like he'd walked off the street. And we can laugh about it now, right? But at the time, you know, there was so many people in the room. And in all fairness, it wasn't a very pleasant experience, and I didn't really have anyone with me who, you know, certainly a nurse or even a doctor that was giving me a lot of reassurance. I was actually getting a lot of, how can I put it? I was actually getting a lot of directions thrown at me or shouted at me, and I was so overwhelmed. I'd had pain relief, so I'd had some diamorphine put in, I believe, in the top of my leg, if I remember correctly. But that made it worse because I then wasn't able to really react to any contractions that were coming through because of the way this diamorphine had affected me. It made me really tired. You know, again, without sort of going into too much nitty gritty, it was quite traumatic. My husband was traumatized. You know, I was kind of just wanting to like go to sleep, and there wasn't really anyone that was giving me some bedside reassurance or anything like that. I actually remember at one point this small lady doctor screaming in my face like, we can't get this baby out by ourselves, you have to help. And I remember thinking at that point, like, I am doing everything I can and I don't know what else I'm supposed to be doing. Like, nobody is really directing me. I'm a first time, you know, going through childbirth for the first time. And what does that even mean, you know? And then all of a sudden what actually happened was I had this beautiful nurse come, and she come and stood beside me. And I remember, the first thing I remember about her was looking at her, and she just had this beautiful warm smile on her face. And I instantly just felt calm. And I remember that she took my hand and she was just talking to me. And she was so reassuring with me. She was telling me that everything was going to be okay. She was saying to me, like, we're going to get this baby out. Like, I just need you to be calm. And I just remember thinking, finally, somebody that can just help me and reassure me. And I suppose I just felt this sense of my stress levels dropped, and I didn't feel as anxious because I had been like so anxious. Like, the whole room was just like almost like chaotic, to be fair, which I understand. You know, things aren't going the way they should be. They need extra people in the room. Other things were happening. And then eventually they decided, no, this baby has to come out. So I ended up having to have an episiotomy and forceps to get her out because she was actually stuck in my pelvis, or the birth canal, I guess, for the want of the right word or description, or that's not the medical term, full disclosure. But anyway, as all this chaos was kind of going on, I just remember feeling like how this nurse really helped me. And she was wearing very dark blue overalls, I remembered, and she had like a dark bob, like, you know, to her shoulder length with a fringe, and her badge said Hazel. And 100%, like, I knew exactly what she looked like, and I knew what her name was, and I knew the sound of her voice. And to be honest, I always think at that particular time, if she had never come along and stood beside me, I just don't know how I would have got this baby out or this baby birthed. It was just so traumatic. So we managed to get Ella out safely with a few cuts and bruises to her, I have to be honest. And then I remember my husband wanting to go and see the baby, and I was like, yep, you go and see the baby, that's all good. And then when I turned back, the nurse had actually gone. And I guess I didn't think too much about it at the time because I thought, oh, obviously she's got, there's, you can hear people screaming all over, and there's, whatever, the whole birthing suite was full and there was lots of people around. So I didn't really think anything of it. And obviously, we did whatever needed to be done afterwards. And I had my baby, she was safe and everything, which was actually just a relief. They got me all tidied up, which was a bit of a length of time in between that to get me put right. And it wasn't until probably a bit after that, later on, I had her very, very early in the morning. I was all cleaned up and everything. And then I had my baby, and then I was talking to my husband. That's it. And I was talking to my husband, and I was like, oh, I really want to see if this nurse, Hazel, is still on duty. And he's like, what do you mean? I said, the nurse that was here, I really would have liked to say thank you to her, because she was literally the one that got me through this whole thing. I felt like she was the only one that really cared about me and wasn't all just about obviously baby. And again, I'm just present saying, like, I know that the midwives and doctors, they're there to make sure that the baby is safe and they're doing their job. But at that particular time, I did feel very lonely, even though my husband was there, right? Us women that have given birth, right? We don't freaking want to see our husband. Don't want to see his face. Get out of here. You got me in this problem in the first place, right? But I remember just thinking I really wanted to say thank you to her. So one of the other nurses had come into the room, and I just asked her, I said, hey, I hope you don't mind me asking, but I'd really wanted to find out if the nurse by the name of Hazel is still on the ward, if she hasn't finished her shift, she's still around. I'd really like to talk to her. And she was like, oh, okay, we don't have a regular nurse by the name of Hazel on the ward, but she might have been an agency midwife that's come in. And I was like, yeah, okay, no problem, to really think about it. My husband's like, which nurse are you talking about? And I was like, the nurse that was standing beside me holding my hand. And he said to me, but there wasn't anyone beside you holding your hand. And I was looking at him. He's looking at me like I'm like the one that's lost my mind, and I'm actually looking at him like he's the one that's lost his mind. Like, what are you talking about? Like, literally, she was there holding my hand, talking in my ear, whispering to me. And I remember her voice because it was almost like she was talking to me like I was a child, right? She was talking to me so calmly, like you would a baby, so calmly. And she was saying things to me like, come on, it's okay, Emma, it's all going to be all right, but I need you to push when we get this next contraction. We just need to get baby out now. And I just remember thinking her voice was just so like a lullaby, just so calm. And literally she would talk to me like I was a baby, like I was a child. Anyway, my husband and I are looking at each other. I digress, right? Because he's like, what the F? And I'm like, what are you talking about? And obviously, you know where I'm going with this story, right? So she goes off to find out about this nurse, and then comes back to me and says there isn't a nurse that's been on duty by that name. And I just looked at her and I was like, no, this is her description. This was what she was wearing. This was what her badge said. Like, I had in my mind 100%, there was not a doubt whatsoever in my mind that this nurse existed, that she was here on this ward, and that she actually stood beside me while I birthed my child. And what happened next really was a series of things which now I look back and think, at that particular time, it never did it come into my awareness. Like, it did come into my awareness that this was spirit, that this was the spirit of a nurse, midwife, that had either been on this ward or had come to me. But what ended up happening, and the reason why I'm telling this story is because I literally would have put my daughter's life on the fact that this happened. And what I want to say to you, if you're listening to this, is it did happen. It 100% happened, only I was the only one that experienced that. But what happened after that, the situation or circumstances, I guess, after this event of what happened, was that everything became rationalized. So when I spoke about this, it was kind of like, oh, like you had some drugs, because I had the dimorphine, I had the painkillers, you were probably hallucinating. It obviously wasn't real because nobody else experienced it, right? So if nobody else experienced it, then surely it wasn't real, right? That's what happened. So I guess what I'm saying here is outside influence and other people kind of saying to me, because this didn't happen to me and I didn't witness or experience this, that this didn't happen to you, and that it was, you not made it up, but hallucinated it or dreamt it or imagined it or all those things. And I know that there's so many of you listening to this right now that can literally understand a time or a situation where you have experienced something and maybe another person with you hasn't, and then they start, I guess they doubt you, or they're like, she's weird, what is she talking about? So then you take on their beliefs, right? You go, oh yeah, I must have imagined it. Oh yeah, that maybe that didn't actually happen. And that's what happened to me at this particular time. And I was already tuned into spirit then. Like I had already had experiences between being 16 and 31 where weird shit had happened to me, but I hadn't really linked the two. I hadn't linked it. I just kind of thought, that's a bit weird, or that feels a bit off or a bit strange. But I hadn't really linked the two things at this time, that these experiences were actually spirit. So when I had this experience with the birth of my first daughter, who thankfully after over 22 hours was born healthy, but a little bit scarred. She was actually with, the different tools and things and interventions that had to happen to have her born. And I think that a lot of people, because this is trauma that can happen, and actually birth trauma isn't actually spoken about a lot, which is why I've chosen to share a bit more of this story. Like I have shared a little bit of the story on different podcasts with different people, but not really the connection to the actual trauma of being in childbirth and my baby actually being stuck and they not being able to take me for an epidural and get her out that way because she was too far down the birth canal. And all of that stuff that was going on. And I now, obviously, once I had then had my full spiritual awakening, I was given all these visions of times when spirit have been there for me, when they have actually fucking saved my life or intervened and helped me in my life's path and journey. Just as I was experiencing those things, I didn't realize that was what was happening because I listened to too much outside noise. I listened to too much of other people's opinions and telling me what actually happened or what didn't happen. And I didn't actually trust myself and understand that this was spirit on my way out. And I spoke to many people who had near-death experiences and had the presence of someone that's come that they should have died in an accident or something like that, but miraculously they friggin' survived, right, by the will of God or whatever that is. Spirit, the universe. I just see it as one big thing. Like I don't really care who you believe in. I actually just think whatever you believe in is right for you. And this is one of those times for me. This is definitely one of those times. And I feel Like, I know now how much spirit came, how this spirit came in the form of this midwife. And this is the thing, right? Spirit comes in the form of a lot of things. A lot of things. It might be someone you meet on the street, right? Like, literally, it might be someone that you meet on the street. And nothing is a coincidence. When you be curious about things that feel like, that was a bit interesting, or that was a bit strange. And I'll continue to say this. Fucking get curious, because I wish that I had got a bit more curious around that time in my life when I obviously had my first child, and thought about, could this be spirit? Is this something that is coming to me? But I guess I also trust the journey. So I trust there was a reason why that didn't particularly happen or awaken for me around that time. But I do know that subsequently, after I had my daughter, so many interesting things would happen to me. So once I actually had her, I would have experiences like the baby monitor would go off, and I could hear baby crying, but then it wasn't her that was crying. Or I'd have it the opposite, where the baby monitor wouldn't go off, and then I would get some other kind of indication of checking on my daughter, like a knowing or a feeling I need to go check on her and go in her room, and she'd be crying, but the monitor hasn't worked properly. You know, if you think back, we're talking 22 years ago, like we just had those little Tomy like monitors with the aerials on them, not the like super duper fancy camera ones that we have now. Other times I'd hear people's voices, or a particular voice, a man's voice, which I actually believe was my granddad coming through the baby monitor. I'd hear a man's voice, and it didn't scare me. It never scared me. And it was at that time that I put that down to spirit, and I was like, this is something, there's something else going on here. But I probably wasn't ready to lean quite into that, you know, where, and a lot of people will resonate with this, is that I just had a baby, I was overwhelmed. Like, sometimes I actually thought I was just going a bit fucking crazy, and I never used to see anything. Like, how I got postnatal depression, like, am I hearing things? Am I making things up? I also went down that avenue. But, you know, subsequently, now I understand that it was just spirit trying to communicate with me. But I was feeling in such a vulnerable way, and this often happens to people when they have lost someone, right, as well. They are feeling in a vulnerable way. So when you start having some experiences, you are frightened to say things, because you are frightened that people are going to think that you've literally lost your marbles, right? So I didn't really tell a lot of people about the things that were kind of weird, things that were kind of going on in the house with the baby monitor and that kind of thing. I never shared a lot of that stuff. I actually kept it to myself, because I was a little bit worried that something weird was going on. And if I have to be honest, like, now I'm just getting like more downloads, like when I actually had her and I went through all that birth trauma, and then subsequently afterwards you're kind of left to deal with that on your own. I actually had ongoing physical health issues after that birth, and I actually remember starting to drink alcohol quite a lot, and I wasn't in a good headspace. I actually did think I had postnatal depression. I started to try and block out the things that were happening to me with alcohol. You know, it started with just like feeling so overwhelmed. I would have a glass of wine like every single night. I was pretty much having a drink, and trying to sort of check out from all of it. And, you know, I did seek some medical help with all of that, and that's just something that I've never really shared with anyone either. So here we are, just bearing my soul to probably even my friends and family that don't know that. And even to the point where I remember my husband coming home from work one day and I was sitting in the same pajamas that I had on the morning. I had a glass of wine and my baby wasn't with me. And I put her into the nursery. And I mean, at this point in time, she was like weeks old. And I remember seeing the horror on my husband's face, thinking, holy crap, have I done something to my baby? And he actually ran up, obviously, to the bedroom. She was fine. Of course, she was fine. But it did trigger something in me that realized, hold on, I need to seek some help over whatever is going on. So I did go down that avenue and I did seek some help. But I think that the mixture of the overwhelming, like really with the birth trauma, right? Not having any support after that to process what had happened. And then obviously having all this spirit experience as well, it just like clashed in the middle somewhere. And it just became all too much. And that's how I can understand how people go down those paths. Like, I would never have judgment for people who go down these paths, because I have been there myself, where I understood the clash between the two and feeling like I was going crazy. You know, obviously I went and seek some support on that and got myself back onto an even keel with that. And I think that had I really understood more as well the situation with spirit and how spirit was trying to work through me and was contacting me, I wouldn't have thought I was going frigging crazy so much. I would have had more understanding. And so many people that I talk to who get communication from the spirit world, you know, and they started out in their journey, feel the same. It doesn't have to be where you are overwhelmed, but it does happen in the beginning, because you don't know what the fuck is going on, and it's coming from all sides, and that's what makes people feel overwhelmed and close it down. And really looking back at me, this was the first time that this spirit communication had opened back up for me in such a massive way since that first episode when I was 16. And I believe that's because I went through that birth trauma. And so many people awaken or have spirit awaken to them when they go through a loss or a trauma. So for me, I truly believe that's what happened. So if you are going through this, if you've gone through this, if anything I've said remotely resonates with you, you know, drop me a line, just drop me a comment, let me know how this lands with you. And, you know, moving on from having that first big experience like that and understanding that there was something else that was going on for me, that sort of took me softly down a very long journey of years of more curiosity, reading about mediumship, psychic work, becoming more interested in seeing people work, going to like shows and things like that of mediumship. And it really opened up and sparked my curiosity and interest more. Like, what is this? Is there a possibility that there is life after death? And I guess that road has taken me some time later now to doing what I'm actually doing. And the biggest thing that I would say is that if you are experiencing like weird or unusual stuff that's happening, stuff that's like, that's just a bit interesting, trust your own instincts. Trust your own instincts and who you can share those things with as well, because there's always going to be the naysayers. There's always going to be the people that are like, nah, you're just lying, or you're making up, or you're talking crap, whatever. There's always going to be those people. But when you can trust yourself and you build trust with you build trust with the spirit world. And the more that you say thank you to the spirit world, like I see you or I hear you, the stronger your connection to them will be. Like, you don't have to sit for hours and hours in meditation to connect to the spirit world. You just have to sit in gratitude for the small signs that you receive and acknowledge them. So, when you see repeated signs on numbers on your phone, whatever it might be, or it might be that you have a particular animal that visits you that might be assigned to you, just acknowledge them. Say, hi, see you, thank you, and just see what happens. Let me know if you try this and something actually happens, because gratitude, sitting in gratitude of being able to do this work, connect with the spirit world, receive information from them, and for me, help others to do the same. Like, I can't tell you how grateful I actually am to be able to do that, to be on this journey and to be sitting here fucking talking to you people now on my own podcast. Get out of here. That's what I think when I go back to that experience back then. Yeah, if you're sitting on the fence, if you're wondering, was that spirit, sit with that, sit with it, ask it to come in, ask it to come close, ask for clarification, ask the spirit world to bring you a sign, maybe from your loved one that's around, or maybe it's some guidance that you're looking for and you need the answer to a question. Spirit are always here to guide you. So I think that's the end of this story that I wanted to share with you. And they're the top takes. Trust what you're receiving. Block out the outside noise. Honestly, the best thing you can ever do is choose who you share your journey with. Well, thank you so much for joining me. And I'm excited to be getting some guests on the show soon. And I am looking forward to sharing more of my own journey and stories with you as well. And if you have a story that you would like me to either read out, or you're interested in coming on my podcast and sharing a story in your journey of how maybe you have had communication unexpectedly with the spirit world, then I would love to hear from you. And there's a link in the notes here for you to submit a request to be a guest or to submit your story to me. All right, guys, thank you so much for listening. I appreciate you all, and I want to say bye for now. Thank you so much for tuning in to Diary of a Medium, Stories from the Spirit World. If something in today's episode has sparked something within you and you are curious about your own spiritual gifts, then check out my website on how I can support you. If you have your own story to share, then please reach out. I'd love to hear from you. If you want to support me, you can subscribe, leave a review, or simply share this with a friend. So until next time, trust yourself, trust spirit, and keep listening to the whispers from the universe. Bye for now.